Clara had always been a fighter, a woman whose strength and perseverance had been tested time and time again. Losing her husband at a young age had been the hardest blow of all, but she refused to let the tragedy break her spirit. Her love for her son, Nathan, became her guiding light, pushing her to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult life became. Every day, Clara rose before dawn, gathering her ingredients and setting up her small stall on a busy street corner in Atlanta. There, she baked and sold homemade cookies, muffins, and cakes, her hands moving with the precision that came from years of experience, even as her heart ached with the burden of being the sole provider for her family. Her son, Nathan, was the reason she kept going. She knew that if she wanted to see him succeed, she needed to be strong. There was never a day that went by where she didn't dream of a better life for him, one that wasn't defined by poverty and struggle. Clara's earnings were meager, but she carefully put aside every cent she could to ensure Nathan had what he needed for school. Often, this meant that she went without the simplest of luxuries, a warm meal, a new pair of shoes, or even a proper coat in the winter. But every sacrifice was worth it when she saw Nathan's face light up with pride at his academic achievements, knowing that her hard work was helping him build a future. Despite the hardships, Clara always made sure Nathan understood the importance of gratitude, humility, and resilience. She'd tell him, "We might not have much, but we have each other. And as long as we have that, we have everything." It was this sense of gratitude and love that kept them both going, even on the toughest days. As Nathan grew older, his determination to excel in his studies only grew stronger. He was acutely aware of the sacrifices his mother made, and he promised himself that one day he would make her proud by rising above their circumstances. Nathan's exceptional intelligence and dedication earned him a scholarship to one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. It was a dream come true, a golden opportunity that Clara had always hoped for, but never imagined would become a reality. However, attending this school was far from easy. Nathan quickly discovered that not everyone was as appreciative of hard work and perseverance as he was. While most of the students came from wealthy families, surrounded by privilege and luxury, Nathan's life couldn't have been more different. He didn't have the expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, or the fancy cars that his classmates took for granted. Among his peers, 2 students, Lucas and Ethan, stood out as the school's most privileged and influential figures. They came from families with money and power, boys who had never known a day of hardship in their lives. To them, Nathan's presence was a curiosity at first, but it didn't take long for their curiosity to turn into disdain. They mocked him for his simple clothes, for the way he carried his lunch in a paper bag, and for the fact that he took the bus to school instead of being driven in a luxury car. "Hey Nathan, did your mom make that sandwich herself? Or did she scrape it together from leftovers she found in the trash?" Lucas sneered one afternoon, his words dripping with contempt. Ethan laughed, adding, "Maybe one day she'll save up enough to buy you a proper meal." Nathan tried his best to ignore them. He'd learned from his mother to rise above the pettiness, to stay focused on his goals and not let the words of others define him, but it wasn't easy. Every taunt, every insult chipped away at him, reminding him of just how different he was from the other students. There were days when he questioned whether he truly belonged in such an environment, whether all his hard work was worth the pain of feeling so out of place. But then he would remember his mother's sacrifices, the way she woke up before dawn every day to bake those cookies and cakes, and he'd find the strength to keep going. The real test came on the day of Nathan's graduation. It was a momentous occasion, the culmination of years of hard work, late nights, and relentless determination. Clara, as proud as any mother could be, was determined to be there, no matter what. She spent the weeks leading up to the ceremony doing extra shifts, selling as many baked goods as she could to afford a dress that would make her feel presentable in front of the wealthy parents and students. On the morning of the graduation, she carefully put on her outfit, smoothing out every wrinkle and making sure her hair was neatly combed. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was the best she could afford, and it was enough for her. As Clara walked toward the school's auditorium, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She couldn't wait to see her son in his graduation gown, to witness the moment that marked the beginning of a brighter future. But as she reached the entrance, she heard the sound of cruel laughter. There, standing by the entrance, were Lucas and Ethan, dressed in expensive suits, their eyes glinting with malice. "Well, well, look who decided to show up," Lucas smirked, looking Clara up and down. "Did you crawl out of a bakery to get here?" Ethan joined in, mocking her appearance. "I'm surprised they let someone like you into this place. Shouldn't you be selling cookies on a street corner somewhere?" Clara tried to walk past them, refusing to let their words get to her. But as she stepped forward, Lucas stuck out his foot, and she stumbled, falling into a nearby puddle. Mud splashed onto her dress, soaking the fabric and staining the clothes she had worked so hard to buy. Her heart sank as she looked down at herself, feeling the sting of humiliation wash over her. For a moment, she considered turning back, running away from the sneering faces and whispers. But then, she remembered why she was there. With all the strength she could muster, Clara stood up, brushed the mud off as best as she could, and walked into the auditorium. She was there to see her son graduate, and no one, not even a couple of privileged bullies, would take that moment away from her. She sat quietly in the back, trying to ignore the stares and whispers, focusing instead on the stage where Nathan would soon walk. As Nathan stepped up to the podium to deliver his graduation speech, he scanned the crowd, searching for his mother. When he saw her, standing tall despite the mudstains and the whispers around her, he felt a surge of emotion. He took a deep breath, and with a voice full of conviction, he began to speak, ready to change the narrative that others had written for him and his mother. Nathan stood at the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. He had rehearsed this speech countless times in front of the mirror, practicing the words that would capture his journey, his achievements, and the gratitude he felt for the people who had supported him. But as he stood there, looking out at the sea of faces before him, he knew that this moment was about something much bigger than just his accomplishments. It was about truth, about honoring the sacrifices made by the most important person in his life, and about confronting the pain he had carried for so long. He could see Lucas and Ethan smirking in the audience, their privileged expressions filled with arrogance and entitlement. But then his eyes landed on his mother, Clara, sitting toward the back of the auditorium. She looked tired, her dress still stained with mud, but her eyes shone with pride and love. In that instant, all of Nathan's doubts and fears melted away. He knew what he had to say, and he knew it was time to finally speak his truth. "Today is a day of celebration," Nathan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's a day that marks the end of one journey and the beginning of another. For many of us, this journey hasn't been easy. There have been challenges, obstacles, and moments when we felt like giving up. But we're here today because of the people who stood by us, who believed in us, and who made sacrifices to help us reach this point." He paused, taking a deep breath as he prepared to say the words he had kept inside for so long. "I want to tell you about someone who has made more sacrifices than anyone I've ever known. Someone who worked tirelessly, who gave up everything just to see me succeed. That person is my mother, Clara." The auditorium fell silent, all eyes turning to the back where Clara sat. Nathan could see the surprise in the faces of his classmates, teachers, and even the parents who had gathered to celebrate their children's achievements. This wasn't the speech they had expected, but Nathan wasn't finished yet. "My mother is the strongest person I know," he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "After my father passed away, she took on the role of both parents. She worked day and night, selling baked goods on the streets, just to make sure I had everything I needed. There were nights when she went to bed hungry so that I could have enough to eat. There were winters when she wore the same coat year after year so that I could have new shoes. She never complained, never asked for anything in return. All she wanted was for me to have a chance to be something more." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she listened to her son's words. She had never expected to be the center of attention, to have her story shared in front of so many people. But in that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just in Nathan's achievements, but in the young man he had become. "But there's another part of this story," Nathan said, his tone shifting, "a part that I've kept to myself for far too long. You see, it wasn't always easy being the kid who didn't have the newest clothes or the fanciest car. There were people who made sure I knew just how different I was, who went out of their way to remind me that I didn't belong here." He turned to face Lucas and Ethan, who were no longer smirking. Their expressions had changed, uncertainty creeping into their eyes as they realized they were about to be called out. "Lucas, Ethan," Nathan said, addressing them directly, "you've spent years mocking me, laughing at me, and trying to make me feel small because of where I come from. You made fun of my mother, ridiculed her hard work, and tried to shame us for not having as much as you, but today I want to thank you." A murmur of confusion spread through the audience. Lucas and Ethan exchanged bewildered looks, clearly not understanding why they were being thanked. "I want to thank you," Nathan continued, "because every insult, every taunt, every time you tried to tear me down, you only made me stronger. You taught me that my worth isn't defined by the clothes I wear or the money in my pocket. You taught me that true strength comes from within, from standing up for yourself and the people you love." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And today, as I stand here, I realize that my mother is the richest person in this room, not because of money or material possessions, but because of her love, her courage, and her unwavering belief in me. You tried to make us feel less than, but you failed because we know that our value doesn't come from the things we have. It comes from the people we are." There was a moment of stunned silence before the applause began, slowly at first, then building until it echoed through the entire auditorium. People stood up, clapping and cheering, some with tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't just Nathan they were applauding, but the message he had delivered, the truth he had spoken so fearlessly. Clara couldn't hold back her tears any longer. They flowed freely down her cheeks as she watched her son receive the standing ovation he so rightfully deserved. All the years of struggle, all the sacrifices, had led to this moment, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have ever imagined. Nathan stepped down from the podium, his heart still racing, but with a sense of peace that he had never felt before. He had done it. He had stood up for himself, for his mother, and for every person who had ever felt like they didn't belong. He walked over to where Clara was sitting, the crowd parting to let him through. When he reached her, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight as if he would never let go. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." "I love you too, Nathan," Clara replied, her voice choked with emotion. "You've made me so proud." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that was all that mattered. The aftermath of Nathan's speech sent shockwaves throughout the entire school community. As soon as the ceremony ended, Murmurs spread among the parents, students, and teachers. People were whispering about the incredible courage it took for Nathan to stand up and speak his truth in front of everyone, especially when he directly called out Lucas and Ethan for their bullying. It was a moment that none of them would soon forget, a moment that had exposed the harsh reality of class divides, prejudice, and the impact of cruelty on those who are struggling to make their way in the world. Lucas and Ethan stood frozen in place as they watched the crowd rally around Nathan, their confident, arrogant expressions replaced with faces full of disbelief and shame. They had never imagined that their actions would be brought to light in such a public and humiliating way. For years, they had believed that their wealth and social status would protect them from any consequences, that they were untouchable. But now, in the face of Nathan's unflinching honesty, they realized how wrong they had been. Later that evening, Lucas and Ethan returned to their homes, dreading the inevitable confrontation with their parents. These were families that prided themselves on their reputations, on the image they projected to society. They were people who attended charity galas, made generous donations to prestigious causes, and ensured that their names were always associated with success and influence. The revelation of their son's behavior had struck a blow to that carefully constructed facade, and they were furious. Lucas's father, Mr. Hastings, was waiting for him in the living room when he arrived home. The air was thick with tension, and Lucas could feel the weight of his father's disappointment even before a word was spoken. "Sit down," his father ordered, his voice cold and stern. Lucas obeyed, lowering himself into the nearest chair, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mr. Hastings demanded, his voice rising with every word. "Do you understand how much damage you've caused, not just to that boy, but to this family's reputation? We've worked for years to build this name, and you've tarnished it in a single afternoon." Lucas tried to defend himself, stammering out excuses about how it was just a joke, how he didn't mean any harm, but his father cut him off. "This isn't a joke, Lucas. This is bullying, and you're old enough to know better. There will be consequences for this, and you will face them." Across town, Ethan faced a similar scene. His parents had received multiple calls from other families, expressing their outrage over Ethan's behavior. They couldn't believe that their son, whom they had raised with every privilege imaginable, could be capable of such cruelty. "We didn't raise you to be this way," his mother said, tears of frustration in her eyes. "You will make this right, Ethan. I don't care how long it takes or how much it costs, but you will fix this." The following week, both families found themselves facing not only the social consequences, but legal repercussions as well. Nathan, with the encouragement and support of his mother, decided to take a stand. He filed a lawsuit against Lucas and Ethan for defamation and emotional distress, refusing to let their actions go unchallenged. It wasn't about the money for Nathan. It was about sending a message that bullying and discrimination could not and would not be tolerated, no matter how wealthy or powerful the perpetrators might be. The news of the lawsuit spread quickly, capturing the attention of the local media. Headlines read, "Brave student takes stand against bullies," and "Scholarship student fights for justice against elite classmates." The story was everywhere, and people couldn't stop talking about it. Clara and Nathan were invited to share their story on radio shows, community panels, and even a local television segment. Their courage inspired many, and messages of support poured in from people who had experienced similar hardships, thanking them for standing up and giving a voice to those who had felt silenced for so long. Lucas and Ethan, on the other hand, were forced to confront the reality of their actions in the courtroom. Their parents hired the best lawyers money could buy, but it quickly became clear that no amount of legal maneuvering could erase the pain they had caused. witness after witness testified about the bullying that had taken place, describing how Lucas and Ethan had ridiculed Nathan for years, how they had gone out of their way to make him feel inferior. It was impossible to deny the truth, and eventually the judge delivered a verdict that would change their lives forever. Lucas and Ethan were sentenced to 6 months in a juvenile detention facility, a harsh but fitting punishment for the cruelty they had inflicted. In addition, the court ordered them to pay substantial financial compensation to Nathan and Clara, both as restitution for the emotional distress they had caused and as a way to ensure that their actions had real, tangible consequences. But more than the monetary aspect, it was the experience of facing their own wrongdoing in a public, undeniable way that served as the most profound form of justice. The fallout from the trial was immense. Both Lucas and Ethan's families faced immense scrutiny and social ostracization. Invitations to elite events stopped coming, and whispers about the case followed them everywhere they went. Friends distanced themselves, business partners reconsidered their associations, and for the first time, they experienced what it felt like to be judged not by their wealth, but by their actions. Lucas and Ethan, once the most popular boys at school, found themselves isolated, forced to confront the reality that they were no longer admired or respected. But for Nathan and Clara, life began to change in the most remarkable ways. The compensation from the lawsuit allowed Clara to finally stop selling baked goods on the street corner. She was able to rent a small storefront and turn her passion into a thriving bakery business, one that quickly became known for its warmth, hospitality, and delicious treats. The local community rallied around her, eager to support a woman who had shown so much strength and grace in the face of adversity. Nathan, meanwhile, prepared to start a new chapter in his life. The story of his courage had reached beyond the local community, and several universities reached out, offering him scholarships and opportunities to continue his education. He chose a school that valued not just academic excellence, but also the qualities of integrity, compassion, and resilience that he had learned from his mother. As he packed his bags and prepared to leave for college, he knew that he was stepping into a future that held endless possibilities, a future that had been built on the foundation of his mother's love and sacrifice. In the end, justice wasn't just about the court ruling or the financial compensation. It was about the way Nathan and Clara's story had touched the lives of so many, about the way they had shown that kindness and resilience could overcome even the greatest of challenges. And as Lucas and Ethan served their sentences, they were forced to reflect on the choices they had made, on the pain they had caused, and on the steps they would need to take to become better people. For Nathan and Clara, the greatest victory wasn't in the punishment of those who had wronged them. It was in knowing that they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever to create a life filled with love, compassion, and unwavering hope. 6 months later, Lucas and Ethan walked out of the juvenile detention facility, each carrying the weight of their actions on their shoulders. The time they had spent there had been a sobering experience, unlike anything they could have imagined. Gone were the privileges and comforts they had taken for granted all their lives. In their place were long days of reflection, hard labor, and hours spent thinking about the consequences of their actions. It was the first time they had been forced to confront themselves without the protective shield of wealth and status, and it had changed them in ways they were still struggling to understand. While they were inside, Lucas and Ethan were assigned to work in different areas. Lucas spent his days cleaning the facility's grounds, picking up trash, scrubbing walls, and tending to the small garden that had been set up to give the inmates something constructive to do. It was backbreaking work, especially under the hot summer sun, and there were moments when Lucas felt like giving up. But with every weed he pulled, with every patch of dirt he turned, he thought about the damage he had done to Nathan and his mother. He remembered the look of defiance in Nathan's eyes as he stood at the podium and called him out in front of everyone. For the first time, Lucas began to understand that his actions had real consequences, that his words could hurt more deeply than he had ever imagined. Ethan, on the other hand, was placed in the facility's kitchen, where he prepared meals for the other inmates. It was a humbling experience for him, someone who had always been used to having others cook and clean for him. He spent hours peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, and washing endless stacks of dirty dishes. His hands became rough and calloused, a stark contrast to the soft, manicured skin he had once been so proud of. But as he worked, he began to appreciate the value of labor, the dignity that came from putting in an honest day's effort. He started to understand, in some small way, the struggles that Clara had faced every day just to put food on the table for her son. The two boys rarely spoke to each other during their time in detention. There was an unspoken understanding between them that they needed to face this journey on their own to confront the parts of themselves that had allowed them to treat Nathan so cruelly. And in that silence, they found a space for introspection, for growth, and for the kind of change that could only come from hitting rock bottom. When they were finally released, Lucas and Ethan knew that they couldn't simply return to their old lives. Things had changed too much, and they had changed too much. Their families were supportive but distant, unsure of how to relate to sons who had been publicly disgraced. Their old friends had moved on, and the social circles that once defined their lives now seemed trivial and shallow in comparison to the lessons they had learned. Lucas and Ethan decided independently that they needed to do something to make amends. They had spent 6 months reflecting on their actions, but they knew that true redemption required more than just serving their sentence. They needed to face Nathan and Clara, to offer their apologies and ask for forgiveness, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it might be. The day finally came when they found themselves standing outside Clara's bakery. It had become a popular spot in the neighborhood, known not just for its delicious baked goods, but for the warmth and kindness of its owner. Lucas and Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the cheerful sign in the window and the customers laughing and chatting inside. They could feel the weight of their guilt pressing down on them, and for a moment they considered turning around and walking away. But they knew that this was something they had to do, not just for Nathan and Clara, but for themselves. Taking a deep breath, they pushed open the door and stepped inside. The scent of freshly baked bread and pastries filled the air, and for a moment they were transported back to simpler times, to memories of their own mothers baking cookies in the kitchen. Clara looked up from the counter as they walked in, and her eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't seen them since the trial, and for a moment there was a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. But then she took a deep breath and stepped forward, meeting them halfway. "Mrs. Anderson," Lucas began, his voice trembling slightly, We came to apologize for everything." Ethan nodded, his own voice choked with emotion. "We know that what we did was wrong. We know that no amount of words can undo the hurt we caused, but we're truly sorry." Clara studied them for a long moment, her eyes searching their faces. She could see the changes in them, the humility, the remorse, the genuine desire to make things right. And in that moment, she felt something shift inside her, a softening of the bitterness and pain that she had carried for so long. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you for coming here, for taking responsibility for your actions. It takes courage to face the people you've wronged." Lucas and Ethan felt a rush of relief at her words, but they weren't finished yet. "We want to do more than just apologize," Lucas said. "We want to help. We want to work here, to contribute in any way we can. We want to learn, to understand the value of the hard work that you've done your whole life." Clara looked at them with surprise. "You want to work here?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Ethan said earnestly. "Please, we want to be part of something meaningful. We want to show you that we've changed, that we're not the same people we were before." Clara considered their request for a moment, and then, with a small smile, she nodded. "All right," she said. "You can start tomorrow, but I'll warn you, it's not going to be easy. This bakery runs on early mornings and hard work, and I expect you to put in the effort." The boys nodded eagerly, grateful for the chance to prove themselves. Over the next few months, Lucas and Ethan became regular fixtures at the bakery. They arrived before dawn, learning how to knead dough, bake bread, and serve customers. They swept the floors, washed the dishes, and handled deliveries. Slowly, they began to earn the trust of Clara and the respect of the community. It wasn't always easy. There were days when they felt exhausted, frustrated, and overwhelmed. But they kept going, determined to prove that they were worthy of this second chance. Nathan watched their transformation with cautious optimism. At first, he had been skeptical, unsure if their remorse was genuine or just another act. But as he saw them work day after day, saw them laugh with customers and help Clara with every task, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had truly changed. One afternoon, as they were closing up the bakery, Lucas approached Nathan with a hesitant smile. "I just wanted to say, thank you," he said, "for giving us this chance." Nathan nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better," he replied. "As long as you're willing to put in the work, I believe people can change." As the months went by, Lucas and Ethan continued to grow, not just as workers in the bakery, but as individuals. They started volunteering at local shelters, using their experience to mentor younger kids and share the lessons they had learned. They became advocates against bullying, speaking at schools about the importance of kindness, empathy, and standing up for what's right. For Clara, the experience was a testament to the power of forgiveness and redemption. She had always believed in the goodness of people, even when life had tried to convince her otherwise. And as she watched Lucas and Ethan become better versions of themselves, she knew that in the end, it wasn't just about seeking justice or finding closure. It was about the possibility of healing, of growth, and the understanding that even the most broken people could find a way to be whole again. In the end, Lucas and Ethan's journey became a part of Nathan and Clara's story, a reminder that no matter how far someone had fallen, there was always a way back, as long as they were willing to face their mistakes, seek forgiveness, and do the hard work of becoming better. And for everyone involved, that lesson became the greatest gift of all. As the story of Nathan, Clara, Lucas, and Ethan began to spread throughout the community, it didn't take long for it to capture the attention of a much larger audience. What had started as a deeply personal journey of pain, resilience, and redemption had evolved into something much more significant. A story that resonated with people from all walks of life. Media outlets, bloggers, and social media influencers picked up on the tale, sharing it far and wide. The bakery became a local landmark, and soon people were traveling from all over the city, even from neighboring towns, just to meet Clara, taste her baked goods, and hear her story firsthand. Nathan's words from his graduation speech echoed far beyond the walls of that auditorium, reaching people who had felt marginalized, bullied, or belittled. His courage to stand up and speak his truth became a beacon of hope for those who had felt powerless in the face of injustice. Schools across the country invited Nathan to speak, to share his story with other students and teach them about the importance of standing up against bullying, about the strength that lies in compassion and kindness. Nathan embraced this newfound role with humility and a sense of purpose. He began traveling to different cities, giving talks to students, parents, and educators. He used every opportunity to share the lessons he had learned from his mother's sacrifices, from the bullying he had endured, and from the journey of forgiveness and redemption that had followed. It wasn't just about telling his story. It was about creating a space where others could feel seen, heard, and understood. After each talk, people would approach him, sometimes with tears in their eyes, to thank him for his bravery, for reminding them that they too could rise above their circumstances. At the same time, Clara's bakery became more than just a place to buy delicious treats. It became a community hub, a place where people could gather, share their stories, and find comfort in the warmth and kindness that Clara offered so freely. She started hosting weekly story hours, where anyone who walked through her doors could take a seat, enjoy a cup of coffee and a pastry, and listen as others shared their experiences. These gatherings grew into something much larger than Clara had ever imagined. People of all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life would come together, creating a sense of community and understanding that transcended social and economic barriers. Lucas and Ethan, who continued to work at the bakery, became an integral part of these story hours. At first, they were hesitant to share their own experiences, afraid of being judged or rejected for the mistakes they had made. But as they listened to others, as they heard the pain, the struggles, and the triumphs of people who had faced their own battles, they began to find the courage to share their journey. One evening, as the crowd settled in and Clara passed around a tray of freshly baked cookies, Lucas took a deep breath and stood up. His voice was shaky at first, but as he spoke, the words began to flow. "I used to think that having money, power, and status was all that mattered," he said. "I thought that those things made me better than others, that they gave me the right to look down on people who didn't have as much as I did. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I hurt people because I was too afraid to face my own insecurities, my own fears. And it wasn't until I was forced to confront the pain I had caused that I realized how much damage I had done, not just to others, but to myself." Ethan stood beside him, nodding in agreement. "We can't change the past," he added. "We can't take back the hurtful words or the cruel actions, but we can choose to be better. We can choose to learn from our mistakes, to grow and to make amends. That's what we're trying to do every single day." The audience listened in rapt silence, and when Lucas and Ethan finished speaking, they were met with an outpouring of support, applause, and even a few hugs. It was a moment of healing, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever felt the sting of judgment, the weight of regret, or the longing for forgiveness. As the months passed, Nathan and Clara found themselves busier than ever, but they always made time to reflect on how far they had come. One evening, after the bakery had closed and the last of the customers had left, they sat together at one of the small wooden tables, sipping tea and watching the flickering light of a candle. "I never imagined any of this," Clara said softly, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I never imagined that all those years of struggling, of working so hard, would lead us here." Nathan reached across the table and took his mother's hand in his own. "It's because of you, Mom," he said. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, it's because of your strength, your love, and your belief in me. You taught me to never give up, to always keep going, even when it felt like the world was against us." Tears filled Clara's eyes, but they were tears of joy, of pride, and of gratitude. "And you've taught me just as much," she replied. "You've shown me that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for kindness, for forgiveness, and for hope." Their story didn't end there. Nathan went on to start a non-profit organization dedicated to combating bullying and promoting empathy in schools. The organization provided resources, workshops, and support for students, teachers, and parents, helping to create environments where every child could feel safe, valued, and understood. Clara became a vocal advocate for single mothers, sharing her experiences and offering guidance to women who were facing the same challenges she had faced. She used a portion of the money they had received from the lawsuit to start a scholarship fund, ensuring that other bright, hard-working students like Nathan would have the chance to pursue their dreams, regardless of their financial circumstances. Lucas and Ethan, inspired by their experiences, began volunteering at local youth centers, mentoring kids who were at risk of falling into the same patterns of behavior that had led them astray. They shared their story openly, not as a means of seeking sympathy, but as a way to show that change was possible, that redemption wasn't just a concept, but something that could be achieved through hard work, honesty, and a genuine desire to be better. In time, the bakery's story hours grew into a larger movement, with other bakeries, cafes, and community centers adopting the idea and creating spaces where people could come together to share, to listen, and to heal. What had started as a small act of kindness in a single bakery had blossomed into a nationwide initiative, a testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and the belief that every person's story mattered. As Nathan and Clara's story drew to a close, they stood on a stage one last time. This time, not in an auditorium, but in front of a packed theater filled with people who had been touched by their journey. "We didn't set out to change the world," Nathan said, his voice steady and clear. "We just wanted to make it through each day, to find a way to survive, to keep going, even when things felt impossible. But what we've learned is that sometimes, just by living your truth, by standing up for what's right, you can inspire others to do the same." Clara stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride. "And in doing so," she added, "you create a ripple effect, one that reaches far beyond anything you could have imagined. Because when we choose kindness, when we choose forgiveness, when we choose to lift each other up, we create a world where everyone has the chance to shine." The audience erupted into applause, and as Nathan and Clara stood together on that stage, they felt a sense of peace, of fulfillment, and of hope for the future. Their journey had been long and difficult, filled with moments of pain and heartbreak, but it had also been beautiful, transformative, and, above all, worth every step. And as they looked out at the faces before them, they knew that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary, a legacy of love, resilience, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest act of kindness could change the world.